What's up guys, it's me, Jeremy. Azir is a champion that's gone through one of the most lengthy and detailed timelines of development ever. He was worked on for about 3 whole years until his eventual release on September 16th, 2014. And during those 3 years, his kit went through numerous redesigns and other development cycles. So join me today in taking a look at the 3 years before his release to see just what Azir could have been. Here's some of my favorite comments where I asked what your favorite thing about the League of Legends beta was. For a chance to be featured in a future video, leave a comment about what your favorite thing about Azir is. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button, and if you don't, hit the dislike, and if this video hits 15k ratings, I'll make another one of these for a different champion. Anyways, let's get started. The champion that would eventually become to be known as Azir began development right after the release of Ahri, so somewhere around December 2011. But Riot doesn't usually give the full name to a champion until they're almost finished with them, so he didn't really have a name at first, but was just designed around the concept of being some kind of Egyptian character, but eventually was given the codename Seth, in reference to the Egyptian god of war. He was originally developed with a concept of being a sand mage involving lore from the Shurima Desert and using sand magic as an overall theme for his abilities. The Sand Mage as a character had a couple of leaks early on from his original conception that really showcased his concept art, but also hinted a little bit at the design of his kit. This leak was so detailed for a character that had no official word from Riot that the community at the time generally regarded them as fake, but they would prove to become pretty realistic elements of his early design stages. Although we never received any hints for the original design behind this kit, this single picture shows quite a bit of some of his design ideas, and you can maybe take some guesses here and there at what his original intentions might have been. Based on the power level distribution, we can speculate that he had some kind of a tanky hybrid playstyle maybe, and was a little bit less mage-like than his name makes him appear based on his magic power rating. I'm not going to try to guess what those ability icons could have been, but maybe the icons do hint a little bit as to what his abilities could have been, but those concept arts and design looked pretty awesome, and also not too far off from what Azir eventually became. However, although Seth was deemed to have an awesome concept and be a great starting point for the design of a champion, Riot wasn't able to work out a nice kit for him, and although he spent a lot of time in development, it was just taking way too long, and so he was cancelled. Champion designer Morello expressed in 2012 that Seth as a character concept existed and had a pretty cool design, and so although they were cancelling him for the time being, it was likely that they would come back to him in the future. Eventually, Seth would be revisited, just as Morello had stated, and here is when we start to really dive into the details of the original designs of his kit. After designing a bunch of straightforward mage kits, Riot decided that the sand mage kind of angle wasn't really the concept that they wanted to approach Azir with, and so they shifted his character to be more of a commander, an emperor kind of focus, deciding that that was the story they wanted Azir as a character to capture. And so a big team of Rioters sat down, split off into groups in a hackathon-esque event to work out some different kits and design different ideas for the possibilities, all with the standing theme of using soldiers. And some of his early abilities that were designed turned out to be really crazy. One of his earliest designs came from champion designer Ezreal, who worked out an ultimate the Rioters called Sand Hands, which would cause 2 giant hands to rise up from the ground and after a delay move together and push everyone between them together, squishing them in. However, this was deemed to be way too powerful and was scrapped completely as the playtesters suffered nightmares from the Sand Hands. As well, another one of the original ideas for his ultimate was this super complex ability that spawned 3 obelisks in a triangle, with lasers linking them together, and anyone inside took extra damage if Azir attacked them, and would also take damage for crossing the lasers. In addition, Azir received a shield based on the damage the obelisks dealt, and if the shield got big enough, Azir would ascend and gain a massive amount of spell vamp, AP, a doubled shield, and movement speed. The ability was shelved because it was deemed, as Xenon, the designer behind Azir, put it, disgustingly overloaded and overcomplicated. But you can't deny that that ability sounds pretty epic, and the ultimate also had a kit that involved using sand as an actual resource that you would gather, and could spam sand missiles from the sources of sand that you gathered. Another variation of his kit had an ultimate that created a sandstorm that covered the entire map and slowed enemies globally across the whole game, but again, that idea was a bit too crazy. All of his kit designs used soldiers as a common theme in their kits somehow. One of them used them as 3 targetable guards that moved in a formation in front of you and blocked skill shots, and you could reactivate the ability to send the soldiers forward as an attack. Another kit summoned soldiers that charged forwards and knocked back enemies, and a third kit had an ability to spawn soldiers which you could then launch as a skill shot to attack enemies. Among all of the various bits and pieces of that grab bag of abilities that I just listed, Riot put together a kit that they thought was good and had potential to be developed further. He was originally made to attack alongside his soldiers, treating them as somewhat of a summoned pet maybe, but eventually they came up with the idea that it was so much cooler and unique if his soldiers were to attack instead of him, rather than in addition to him, and that was the brain blast that set the design of Azir in motion, and eventually he was given a finalized rough draft of a kit, which actually was still a little bit different to his kit today. One of Azir's first drafts of an official kit that was used in internal testing looked like this. His passive was Sand Soldiers, which summoned a soldier for 12 seconds every time a minion or monster died, or after damaging an enemy champion. His abilities interacted with the soldiers and moved them around, but any ability that interacted would reduce their duration by 2 seconds, and every time a soldier collided with an enemy champion they would explode, knocking them back and dealing damage. His Q was Quicksands, which caused all active soldiers to dash to an area, and after a half-second delay the Quicksand would deal magic damage to enemies inside and root them for 1 second. And his W was Castle, which would cause him to switch places with one of his summoned Sand Soldiers. His E was called To Me, which would call all Sand Soldiers to his current position, and then summon additional Sand Soldiers on his former position when he activated the ability. And as for his ultimate, it didn't really have a name, and we don't have the ability details like we do for the rest of that kit, but Xenon is quoted as saying that it summoned 9 additional Sand Soldiers. Anyways, that was one of the more thought out iterations of his early design, which existed in closed beta testing only and was never released to the public in any way. And there's a lot of tweets from Daniel Klein, aka Xenon, who was the head champion designer for Azir, quoting those specific details and images. However, with this kit, it seemed to be quite clunky and overall just kind of weird to play with, and Daniel, or Xenon, whatever you want to call him, is quoted as saying that the gameplay of this version of the kit was just awful. And so it was reworked again, until Riot would finally reach the kit that Azir now has today. Some interesting concepts is that his E remained quite similar to Castle, and it's possible that his new passive takes inspiration from maybe the Obelisk Ultimate idea. As well, his Q and Sand Soldiers stayed intact, and it's not too hard to see the similarities between his current kit and the kit that Daniel Klein showcased on Twitter. Eventually, Azir had his kit truly finalized and he was put into the PBE, and I can honestly say that he remains one of the more unique and interesting champions that League of Legends has to offer, with an incredibly complex kit, and it's so cool to see how far he's come and really just what Azir could have been. And that's just about it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.